We're screaming at Helots and fighting for fame and glory. That's right, it's NEXUS from D-verse. This sci-fi bloodfest features an entire role-playing experience and leveling system to develop a story around the game. The main event? A 1v1 fight to the death between competing Helots, genetically engineered super fighters, each owned by a player known as a Lanista. During the game, the players, or Lannisters, will roll action dice to issue commands to their Helot, each attempting the most glorious combat performance possible. Today we're going over the 1v1 combat mechanics. The role-playing and leveling system can be explored in the core rulebook from D-verse. It features leveling mechanics, an extensive economy for upgrading Helots, armor and weapon options, and much more. Setup begins with each player picking a motivation from the 8 available and acquiring their character sheet, an erect card, a free card, and their motivations mini. Next, shuffle the influence card deck, deal 7 to each Lanista, who selects 2 to keep, face down, removing the rest from the game. Most of these cards are instant actions and include instructions on their play timing. Once used, an influence card is discarded from the game. Next, shuffle the turning point cards and weapon cards to create draw decks. Build the board by assembling the game frame like so. Add hazards to the map, either randomly, by rolling dice for their placement, or by arranging them by agreement of the competing Lannisters. Finally, place the Helots in their starting positions, and each Lannister rolls a d12 to see who goes first. The first player is known as the favorite, and the second player is known as the underdog throughout the game. During the game, players will track their overall damage, their location-specific damage, and any modifiers to their abilities on their character sheet. We'll get into the specifics on damage in just a sec. One core mechanic of the game is the sliding dice scale, also known as SDS. All Helots have abilities that start at a value on the scale. Modifiers in the game, such as flanking position or upgraded attacks, can increase the SDS level of dice rolled for a test. For instance, if an ability starts at step D10 and receives a +2 SDS bonus in-game, that Lannister would roll a D6 plus D8 instead. However, the scale goes both ways. Injuries and conditions can subtract SDS from rolls as well. At the start of their turn, the active Lannister rolls a d6 in what is known as the action point roll. The total equals the number of action points a Lannister may spend in a single turn on movement and actions. For the cost of 5 damage to their Helot, a Lannister may use the motivation button ability to increase a roll to an automatic 6. Additionally, whenever rolling the action die, the Lannister places a coin in their frame counter next to the number they rolled. Depending on the scenario, any numbers rolled that already have a filled slot don't get an additional coin, but instead may trigger the activation of hazards on the map. Once a Lannister has filled 3 slots on their frame counter, they draw and activate a turning point card, which can help or hinder the Helots. After filling all 6 slots, the Lannister draws 1 more turning point card, and that player's Helot gains a +6 damage bonus on their next successful strike. Action points may be spent on movement around the board. A forward or forward diagonal move costs 1 action point. A pivot 90 degrees also costs 1 action point. Moving backwards costs 2 action points, and Helots cannot move backwards diagonally. That's bad crazy. A Helot may strafe while maintaining their direction for 2 action points. Additionally, when strafing or moving backwards, the player may take a risk and only use 1 action point, but then must roll a d6, and a result of 3 or lower causes their Helot to fall prone. Positioning is important. If a Helot flanks their opponent, they gain 1 SDS to their attack, and if directly behind them, they gain 2 SDS. Now let's talk attacks. Melee attacks must be made from within 1 forward-facing square of the Helot. The character sheets for each motivation list the available attacks and their base SDS before adding any modifiers. I'm going to review the types of attacks first, then we'll get to damage. Wild attack. For 1 action point, this flailing attack can be made in any forward or side square from your Helot, for the cost of 1 damage point. Additionally, the damage dealt only affects the overall damage on an enemy. Standard attack. For 2 action points, this attack can be delivered to any forward square and damages both the overall and one random body location of your opponent determined by a D8 roll. Focus attack costs 3 action points and must be delivered directly in front of the Helot, and allows the damage to be applied overall and to a specific location of the Lannisters' choosing. Arm punch! Precision attack costs 6 action points and must be delivered directly in front and can only be performed after a natural 6 on the action roll. A successful strike destroys one of the vital areas on an enemy Helot, imposing a -1 SDS for all attack and defense rolls. There are aim attacks as well for ranged weapons in the game. These follow the same rules but require the Helot to have line of sight. Grapple allows a Helot to wrestle an enemy for 2 action points. Grapple does no damage, but incapacitates an opponent until they can liberate themselves. While grappling an opponent, a Helot may perform special actions like drag, throw, takedown, and crush. Other actions include Liberate. For 1 action point, this allows a Helot to free themselves from a grapple with a successful roll against the grappler's crush roll. Stand Up. For 1 action point, this requires a D6 roll of 4 or higher to rise from being prone. Push, like precision attack, costs 6 action points, can only be used with a natural 6 on the action die, and pushes an opponent back 1 square. Additionally, any maximum roll on a non-wild attack is known as a perfect strike and forces your opponent to roll a D6 in response. If they roll a 3 or less, they fall prone. When attacking, the active Helot rolls their attack dice against the defense dice of their opponent. If the attacker's total exceeds the defender's, the attack hits. Damage dealt equals the difference between the rolls, plus any damage modifiers of the attacking Helot. Remember that damage to body locations also does damage to overall health. Additionally, location-specific damage inflicts penalties. Losing an arm means -1 SDS for attacks, losing a leg is -1 SDS for defense, and losing midsection is -1 SDS for both. Once a Helot takes full damage to either overall, head, or chest, they're out of the game and the match is over. Lastly, there are hazards on the map. Each hazard has special trigger and placement rules and adds a fun and dangerous spin to an already super violent game. And that's Nexus. I'm Becca Scott and I'm great at flanking. Watch. See? You can watch me and my friends play this game and other awesome games on Game the Game right here on Geek and Sundry.